Hi, and welcome back to Wildman Wheels. Man, this shop is so much better. I still have a handful of things that I need to get put away, I really need to build a shelf right there. Nice big shelf and put everything on. These shelves are so narrow. They're just literally the thickness of a can of paint. Just can't really get a whole lot on there, and you got to spread everything out real wide. But that's going to be future projects. Today, we're going to be digging into this guy. You guys might remember this one from a little while ago, right before I started working on the Pug. This old generator right here is a 6,250 watt generator. It's a big boy. It was seized up. It was locked up, and we were able to get it to start and run off of starting fluid to verify that the generator works. We were able to get the lights to turn on when we got it running. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be go ahead and getting a new carburetor on here, getting a new fuel line, new fuel petcock, and we're also going to be converting this guy over to tri-fuel. Yep, tri-fuel. We're going to be able to run it on natural gas, propane, or gasoline. So you can use it at any point in time, but any situation. So this generator is going to be primarily used backup generator, right? And one of the biggest issues with gasoline is it goes bad pretty quickly. It doesn't take much time for it to go bad. A common misconception is small engines can run on anything you put in them. That's not entirely true. Could a small engine like this run on bad gas? It sure could. You'd have to go in there and adjust the jets. You'd have to retune the carburetor for the bad gas. And you can probably get it to run halfway decent, but you're going to lose a lot of horsepower. And then when it comes time to put fresh gas in it, now you got to rejet it and retune the carburetor for good gas. So could it be done? Yes. But are you going to go out there and rejet your carburetor and tune it to run on your bad gas? No, you're not. I'm not either. So it's kind of just, good practice to just not leave gas sitting in small engines. And as a result, what's the easiest thing to do? Well, run it on propane. Propane never goes bad. You can have 5-gallon bottles of propane just laying around for years and years on end. And as long as the valves aren't seized or rusted or anything like that, you'll be able to hook it up to this bad boy and run it no problems. So that's kind of one of the nice things. And for a backup generator, I think that's probably one of the best. One of the downfalls to running small engines, or let's just say generators in general, on natural gas or propane as opposed to gasoline, you lose a lot of the horsepower rating when you go from gasoline to propane, and then you lose even more horsepower when you go to natural gas. Kind of general rule of thumb, you're going to get about 70 to 75% of your horsepower on propane. So if we got a 10 horsepower on propane, you're going to get about 7.5 horsepower, which means obviously you're not going to be getting your 66,000 watts out of the generator. You go to natural gas, you're going to lose about 50% of your horsepower. This 10 horse is now going to suddenly be a 5 horse. So that's something you got to keep in consideration if you're going to try to run a generator off of natural gas or propane. The horsepower ratings are for gasoline, not for propane, not for natural gas. So if you're going to run off of natural gas, maybe you have natural gas at your house and you'd like to just plummet straight into the natural gas, maybe where you got your barbecue grill hooked up, that's great, but you just need to keep in mind that however many watts that you're going to need to run your house, you're going to basically need to get double that in order to be able to run your house. So let's go ahead and dive into this thing. I think the first thing I want to do is pull this cover off. I got a whole box of parts over here. We're going to replace this little toggle switch that wasn't working. We got our wires here for that. Let's get this cover off. Let's get the fuel line replaced. That goes through the cover here. Let's get our toggle switch replaced. We'll get that back on, and then we'll go ahead and get the carburetor changed out. it's been a minute since I took this apart, and so I got to double check the positions on the switch here. So I put it in and hook up the wires, which ones go where. So basically what we have here, we have 3 wires. So if you're ever in this situation, you're figuring out which wires go where and what am I trying to do with it. So on this one, we have this green wire, which if you can see is actually connected to the coil. This black wire right here, the smaller black wire, if we trace that back, it goes right here to the side of the engine frame. And this wire, big thick wire, if we follow that down, it goes down here to the low oil shutoff switch. So basically what we're trying to do is at any given point in time, we're trying to connect either this one to the ground or we're going to try to connect this one to the ground. If we end up with low engine oil pressure, we want to, or not pressure, low engine oil level, we're going to want to connect this guy to both of these. We're going to want to kill the engine. If we're just done using it, we want to connect these two together to kill the engine. So at any point in time, we're going to want to make sure we have ways to safely shut the engine down, and that's what this is for. So this switch right here that I got, it's the same as the old one. It has 3 tangs on it. I don't know if you can see. So we got to figure out in which position do each of these tangs. So those 2 are always connected. Okay. That one has to be connected. Okay, so this one, we want this one to be the ground, the middle one to be the ground. And then we want the green one to be on this bottom one here. So that way, only when the switch is turned to the on position will it kill the engine. It'll connect these 2 wires together. It'll ground out the coil onto the frame. But then this guy right here, we put them in like so. And then these 2 are connected all the time. And what will happen is this will actually ground the coil out through the fuel shutoff, or the low engine oil level, I should say, the low engine oil level switch. So that's how we're going to connect these guys. So, yeah, this is right there, equipped with low oil shutdown. So let's go ahead and get these guys. Back in there. Perfect. Perfect. Now let's see if we can feed this hose right through here. Perfect. That's going to connect to the new carburetor. We'll run this up to about here. That's where we'll put our fuel filter in, right in here. I'm going to leave this side a little bit long. I'd like to be able to trim that back as needed. A little bit of a tight fit in there. These little wires, but here's that. Perfect. All right, we got our fuel line coming through here. That's perfect. All right, in bolts. Okay, all the hardware is in place. We've got our toggle switch installed. So So if you look right here, if I can get the camera in here, you can see this big opening right here. That's where a starter would go if this came with an electric start. There's this little piece of sheet metal right here that's going to go and it's going to cover that spot. And you might be tempted when you take this apart to just leave this cover off, but I'll warn you against that because this is an air-cooled engine, and so it requires airflow in order to stay cool, hence the term air-cooled engine. If we have, this is the fan, the flywheel itself inside of there is the actual fan. So if we leave that cover off, this is a big old huge gaping hole that's going to allow a lot of air to come out. That's going to prevent, it's not going to allow as much air to flow across the head up here where it needs it. All of the sheet metal on these air-cooled engines is actually extremely crucial to leave on the engine. If you notice back here, see how the back of this is all open. That's because it wants all of that air to flow across these fins and to exit out over here, pulling as much heat off of the engine as possible. So keep that in mind. Remember that, and don't leave any covers off. It's detrimental. Just leaving a plate like that off could quite literally take years off of the life of the engine. So don't take it off. If it's on there, it's on there for a reason. Okay, let's jam this new carburetor on there. Let's stick that new guy on there. All right, so if you look at the old carburetor right here, this is the linkage, and they use these little plastic bushings to kind of take up the slop in here, right? If you look at the new one, you can't even hardly see through it. There's this tiniest little hole. I was looking on the underneath side of it here, and it looks like they snapped it in and then maybe hit it with like a soldering iron or something to kind of melt it so you can't take it back off. But I can't even get the rod in. So I'm going to use a drill bit that's the exact same diameter as the rod, and I'm going to try to drill that out. It doesn't need to actually attach itself to the rod, so it's not like it's not like it clips in or anything like that. There we go. Okay, if you look at it now, see, now you can actually see right clear through it. And that's what you want. That's what the old one looked like. I don't know if you can focus. So you can see right through it. It's just a bushing to take up the slack for the actual pin. It's not, there's nothing that needs to attach that. So if you get one like that, just get you the right size drill bit and drill it out. What keeps the rod from falling out is the fact that it's got kind of a Z shape to it. So you got to push it in and then rotate it 90 degrees. So that right there, it ain't going anywhere. Now the next thing I'm going to do is connect this fuel line. Now it's up to you. It's up to you. You do whatever you want, but you don't have to put hose clamps on low pressure hose barbs like this. It's just gravity feed. It's not going to leak. Tighten this guy down. Perfect. Remember guys, small hardware, small torque. You don't gotta get crazy with it. Okay, perfect. We got her connected. She's bolted on. The throttle is hooked up. There's choke off, choke on. Perfect. Okay, she's connected to the governor. Everything's great. Now the next thing we'll be doing is we'll be connecting the fuel line here. But Well, there's a spacer that goes in between these two, right? Or does it? How do you? Not mine right there. Oh, that choke cable, the choke lever is a little bit taller on this guy. Okay, so we're gonna have to bend that down to make that work, but that's okay. So like I was saying, we have a crankcase breather elbow on the actual air filter elbow that goes right in here. So we can run the crankcase breather up over here, and we can run the propane in right here. Now, I could use this to also be the propane inlet. We could use either one of them. So I might take my crankcase breather, we might actually run it right here. Directly into the carburetor where this hose, where this elbow is set up right here. It might make it a little bit easier. And then with this guy, I can turn this elbow 90 degrees down, or maybe 180 degrees, so it's pointed this way, right? And then we can run our propane line can come around here, and that'll keep it further away from the engine, further away from heat, and things like that. So I think I might actually do it like that. Just going to trim off probably about 1/2 inch, not much. Carefuling. All right. There we go. That's going to keep that hose from kinking right there. So a nice clear opening to the crankcase. That'll actually work nicely. Not having the crankcase breather will cause issues, okay? The crankcase on small engines is set up a lot differently than crankcases are set up on cars, right? On cars, you generally have your PCV valve, positive crankcase ventilation, right? With these guys, it'll actually run up to 7 PSI vacuum on the engine. It's physically pulling a vacuum on the engine, keeping, and the thought process behind that is to, if the crankcase is at a low pressure, you're pulling a vacuum on it, then the piston inside has less resistance that it has to go through, and it gives you more horsepower. That's the thought process with these. But if you don't, that thing will puke oil. It'll puke oil all over the place. You'll be trying to, you can't really cap it off. It needs to have a good actual vacuum on it. If you have a vacuum on it, no oil will come out. If you don't have a vacuum on it, oil will come out. So you got to keep that guy on there. All right, perfect. Now we got that bad boy on. Now we got to get these this air cleaner, or the elbow for the air cleaner installed. Let's see, can we rotate you? Oh, we can rotate you just straight down. Because we can still get in there to get our little screws. Perfect. Now, one of the things we're running into, a little issue we're running into, is you see how this choke lever is perfectly flat, and this choke lever has a pretty sharp little bend there. That's actually causing us some problems. We can't just easily take that off because that is riveted onto the engine. So we're going to have to physically bend it. Carefully, because we don't want to break it. I'm sure this is not made from high quality steel. And breaking would be very easy. Okay, now we have our choke. Choke is in the off position. Choke is in the on position. It's actually kind of funny. They have this little arrow built into it, so you can, choke on. It's kind of cute. Okay, nice and tight. There we go. We can turn the choke on and off. Perfect. We got our fuel line connected. We got our crankcase breather connected. We'll go ahead and put the air filter on. Check this guy out. Brand spanking new air filter. There we go. Perfect. That goes on like so. And then this little guy goes like so. There we go. That's on there nicely. Okay, perfect. There we go. Carburetor is installed. We even had to make a couple little modifications to make it work, but nothing crazy, nothing that you can't do. I have faith in you. All right, there we go. I think we got it all set up. We just got to get the fuel filter, the inline fuel filter. We have a new petcock, because I don't know if you remember, the old one snapped off, like right here in this general area. And so we're going to fix that. Okay, so there's the, I think this is just like a heat shield more than anything, but you can see there's a hole where you can get to the spark plug. So you can pull the spark plug out, and then there's a hole right here for the fuel line to go up into. So I want to do something first. We know this engine runs. We know we're going to be able to fire it up and get it to run on gasoline. We had it running on starting fluid, so I know that that's going to work. I think the next thing that I want to do is I want to get the this guy, regulator. I want to get this guy mounted and installed onto the machine real quick. First, I want to get this thing started on propane first. I want to get it fired up and started on propane so I can show you it works. And then after that, we can hook up the gasoline. We'll shut off the propane, and then we'll go ahead and fire it up on the gasoline and verify that everything's working. And then we can change the oil and, you know, just step 17. Just keep doing things. So here's the fuel tank, and there's our broken nipple right there. Oh, look, there's a hole in the middle of the fuel tank, so you can change the spark plug. That's kind of nice. Very thoughtful of them. Yep. Okay, so there's that. So we can indeed put it right there. That should be fine. The only thing is, we're going to need nuts and bolts on the backside. So I think we're probably still better off doing it over here. We're going to have some extra hoses kind of running around, but it is what it is. This has to be in the upright position, and it only has these two mounting points. There's no third. So you can't mount it like this. It has to be upright. So that kind of limits where we can mount it. And I could maybe weld a bar across here, and we could have it a little lower. It is what it is. What I'm trying to show you guys is you don't have to go buy the $200 or $300 kit for your generator in order to have a bi-fuel or a tri-fuel system. You can do it yourself, and you can buy the parts, and it's inexpensive. Okay, this is we've got a bag of parts and pieces. It came with all kinds of little hose adapters and all kinds of T-fittings and chingalooies. But what's the difference between me installing it and buying a kit? Nothing. And when I looked online for this particular generator, this particular carburetor, the only thing that they did, this is how they did it. The gasket between this elbow and the carburetor, they had created a gasket that was like 3 times thicker, and they had a hose integrated into that came from outside, and it went into that little gasket area. You use longer screws to sandwich it all together, and then the propane literally just comes out of this guy into their little fancy gasket, which then introduces the propane directly into the carburetor. Well, okay, that's nice and fancy and all, but that's all that they're doing. And they're charging you $300. You can buy this guy on Amazon for a lot less than $300. Okay? You can buy this guy on Amazon for like $50, and it comes with all kinds of adapters and fittings. Probably not going to use most of these, but this is where you're going to screw your propane adapter kit, right? That screws into the your hose. Your propane hose just screws directly into here. You have your outlet that comes from here directly into there. That's it. It's two pieces. It's like not difficult. It's not difficult. So let's get started with this. It's also low pressure. This is very low pressure propane. You're gonna have higher pressure propane coming into here, very low pressure propane coming out here. So you don't need to worry about getting some kind of crazy, propane specialty hose. This guy right here is going to work just perfectly fine. This is fuel line. This is actually high pressure fuel line for injection systems. So it's rated for 60 PSI. You'll never see 60 PSI coming off of that. That'll just bloop, right on there, run up to here. You're done. It's simple, 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 easy, simple. So let's get this going. Let's drill a couple holes right here. And let's jam this bad dude in here. Let's see if we can't make this thing run on propane. Perfect. Okay, we got her mounted on there, nice and solid, ain't going nowhere. The next thing that we're going to be doing this is our regulator valve. If you want to think about it, it's basically like a carburetor. You've got an adjustable jet, if you will. So you can thread the bolt in or out. You got a jam nut here. So you can set, once you've figured your spot, you can lock the jam nut in place. And so this is what's going to make it tri-fuel. You can set this for propane, and then if you hook it up to natural gas, then you can just simply adjust this, add more, add less, whatever you need to do to get the engine to run the way you need it to. So we're going to be attaching this. I think I'm going to put it this way, so the nipple is going to face off to this side. We'll run the hose down and then up into here. We'll use a couple zip ties to hold it, keep it as nice and neat as possible. Also, this little dude right here, we got an adapter. This is 3/4 inch. We'll reduce this down. Whoop, whoop. To that guy. We've got ourselves a 5-foot hose. We'll be able to thread this hose directly into here and run this hose. I got an adapter on this side to connect to that, so then we can connect to the Chingalui. That's later. We're gonna do that in a minute. Also, you want to make sure that you roll the tape on the correct direction. You want to make it so as you install your fitting and you tighten it on, you're not basically unwinding the Teflon. So if you look at it, you can see my little tail there where it's coming down, and I'm going to be turning with the tail. If I had it wrapped the other way as I was turning it on, it could grab that tail and unwind it as I'm actually threading it on. Okay, so here's a prime example of why you don't want to thread, and I did this intentionally to show you. See how as I started to thread it on there, it came off. It didn't stay on tight. So putting your Teflon tape on the correct way is very important. regulator bolt. I know it seems, you might be looking at this going, man, that seems kind of janky, but I assure you, this is how it's done. If you go buy one of those expensive $200-300 kits, it's gonna have this exact same setup. It might look a little bit different, your valve might look a little different, might be bigger, might be smaller, but it's working off of the same exact principle. So it's how they do it. All right, we got one more adapter, and then we can go ahead and throw our propane onto that guy. So let's do that. Grab a Chingalooey, and yeah. Perfect. That ought to do the trick. Go there. All right, so we got our little hose here. Let's clamp on there. Let's get you there. Let's go ahead and hose clamp down here. Get you installed there. Now I am making this hose longer than it really needs to be, intentionally, because I like having a little extra on either side, just in case you got to end up clipping a piece of it off and, you know, having to start all over again. Or, you know, you pull it apart and you need to, that's just me. That's just me. I like giving myself 3 or 4 extra inches. This does two things. Propane comes in and it regulates the amount of propane that gets to come out. So you don't have 100% just full tank pressure just blowing through there. The second thing it does is a back pressure valve. So if for some reason there's a backfire in the engine and it tries to send pressure back up this way, it'll slam it closed and prevent flame getting to the tank. It's two things. But then there's also the same thing on the tank itself. So you got 2 of those. Okay. I think we're ready. Let me go grab a propane tank real quick. And will this reach? Yeah. But I think I kind of want to set this down on the ground. It'll be much easier to pull start. We're going to start out with this. We're just going to crack it open a little bit. Try to get it start. If it won't, then we'll just keep opening it until it starts and runs, and then we will adjust this bolt. We'll adjust this out and get it to where it's running nicely. Once we have it running on the propane, then we'll get the fuel tank hooked up. We'll get the tank cleaned out. We'll get the fuel line hooked up, get that all set up and situated, and then we'll run it off of gasoline, make sure that's working good, make sure the idle screw and everything's adjusted well, and then she's ready to rock and roll. So yeah, let's do that. We got a propane tank with some propane in it. Let's go ahead and get this bad dude hooked up nice and tight. Give ourselves a little bit of space here. We're gonna have to adjust this. So it's probably not going to start right off the bat. Let's open it up nice and slow. Ooh. Okay. Let's start with this closed. And this is something we're going to have to try to figure out. All right, does it work? Yes. Is it pretty terrible? Yes. I think the main issue is this hose is tiny on the inside. I think this is our main restriction right here. I don't know if I'm going to need to try to get a larger diameter hose. That also might be a restriction too. But long story short, it does run on propane. It does produce electricity. You saw, I actually used the lights themselves to help get it tuned in. I could see, oh, it's not very bright, and oh, there are more LEDs lighting up, and we keep making adjustments until we were able to get it. Now, I think at this point in time, we need to do a little more. It's not getting enough fuel. We're not able to supply the engine with enough propane. I was only able to get it to run on full choke, and that's as good as it was going to run, which if you have to run something on full choke means not enough fuel. So because at that point in time you're reducing the amount of air the engine could suck in, and you're actually creating a pretty good air-fuel ratio with reduced amount of air. But as you can see, I was running the lights and used the chop saw, cut a piece of metal. Chop saw is approximately 1,800 watts. She's a big old chonky one. So the fact that it ran that, it probably was not delivering 1,800 watts to the chop saw. But that's okay. It works. It runs. It does things. I think we need to investigate this hose, possibly larger diameter hose on the inside to give it a little more chooch, a little more fuel flow to it. But as you can see, it fired right up, ran, and where it's currently sitting at right now, we should be able to fire it right up. It should run instantaneously again. Anyway, so that's great. That's great news. Let's get the fuel tank installed. We got an inline fuel filter. Let's get the fuel tank installed. Let's get some fresh gas in this bad boy. And let's fire this thing up on gasoline and see how she runs. It needs to go. Yeah, that's the right way. Yeah, because the spark plug lines up with that hole a lot better. Okay. All right. Let's drop this dude in like so.
You know, getting this generator all finished up kind of reminds me of one of my favorite Bible verses, Luke 6:35 and 36. Love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will truly be acting as children of the Most High. For he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate.
Is that filter filling up? Can't see it from here. All right, what we got going on here? Oh, wait, I hope I turn it on. Oh, yeah. It's filling up. Perfect. Okay, so full choke, engine on. We have the propane off over here. Let's fire it up. Thing runs like a champ. Heck yeah. All right, so we learned something. Propane hoses for, I don't know, your gas grill. And I don't have enough BTU potential to run a 10-horse generator, but that's okay. We can still change that out. I'm thinking the reason why it came with these hose barbs is because you're going to need a hose that big to run anything. So that's not difficult. We can fix that. We can add this guy here, get a piece of hose, add this guy on the other side, and then we'll have to get an adapter and then just attach this guy to it. That should be fairly easy to do. I think once we do that, we'll be able to get enough flow out of the tank into the regulator here. We'll actually be able to run the engine. It should run pretty dang good. So I think that's going to do it for this episode. We've been working on this thing quite a bit. We took it from not running, being locked up, to running like a champ. And basically all we really did to the generator itself, we put a carburetor on it. That's it. Carburetor, fresh gasoline. So whatever you got out there, it just needs a carburetor and some fresh gasoline. Just start with that. Just start with that. Hit it with some starting fluid and see if you can get it to start. If it'll start on starting fluid, easy peasy. Go buy you a carburetor, buy you some new fuel line, get you a new fuel filter, just all that, clean it out, put it all back together with a new carburetor, and you'll be off and going before you know it. So, thanks for stopping by, and have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful weekend.